If you've ever sat in a room and felt like everyone else got a script but you, then you already know exactly how that day felt. I was 31 when my family sat around a polished conference table and decided, in legal language and fake smiles, that I was worth exactly zero. Not metaphorically, on paper. My name is Hannah Miller, and the funny thing is, the part that hurt most wasn't the money, it was how unsurprised I was. The conference room itself looked like every lawyer's office in every movie you've ever seen. Long wooden table that reflected the ceiling lights, ergonomic chairs that were clearly more expensive than they needed to be, bottled water lined up like soldiers no one touched. Behind the lawyer, a floor-to-ceiling window framed the city skyline, all steel and glass, like the world outside didn't care what happened in this room. My mother, Linda, sat where she always sits when there's power involved, in the center, slightly angled toward whoever's in charge. Her back was perfectly straight, hands folded, wearing that neutral social smile she used at charity galas and board dinners. My sister Emily sat at her right, of course she did, legs crossed, phone face down on the table, relaxed, like this was a formality, not a question. My father, Richard, chose the chair farthest from me and kept his eyes on a folder like it contained nuclear codes. The lawyer, Michael Brooks, cleared his throat and opened the thick estate file. Before he could say a word, my mother leaned in, voice smooth and practiced. There's no need to drag this out. My daughter Emily will be receiving $30 million from my father's estate. There it was. No build-up, no gentle phrasing, just a number dropped on the table like a casual tip. Emily let out this small, controlled breath, the kind you do when you pretend you're surprised but you already rehearsed your reaction in the mirror. There were murmurs, a couple of polite congratulations from my mom's lawyer friend, someone's little laugh like this was the happy ending everyone had been expecting. Michael glanced at his notes. "And Hannah?" "She gets nothing," my mother cut in. She turned to me, eyes clear, voice calm enough to make the words sharper. "Your grandfather made his wishes very clear. You chose your own path. This is final." You know that feeling when your body should panic but doesn't? My pulse slowed instead of spiking. There was no surprise, no "how could you?" It was more like watching a label finally get printed and stuck on something you'd been carrying your whole life. Growing up, I'd always been the extra, too quiet, too independent, too not Emily. This was just the formal version of that. Emily gave me a quick look, half pity, half I win. My father suddenly found the wood grain on the table fascinating. It was almost impressive how much effort he put into not looking at me. "Michael," my mother said, "we're done here." Michael didn't move. He just hesitated. It was tiny, maybe half a second, but I watched it land in the room like a dropped pin. My mother noticed too. "Is there a problem?" she asked, the sweetness gone from her voice. He closed the main folder very deliberately. "There may be," he said quietly. And for the first time that morning, my mother's smile twitched. Those next few seconds stretched. Nobody breathed. It felt like the air got thicker, like the room knew something my family didn't. My mother recovered first. She always does. "There is no problem," she said, tone clipped now. "We've already handled everything that matters. Let's not turn this into a performance." She turned to me like she was giving me a stage I didn't ask for. "Well, do you have something to say, Hannah?" Every eye swung in my direction. This was my cue, right? This is where I was supposed to cry or explode or deliver some shaky speech about fairness and family and how could you? My mother has always believed feelings are weaknesses you can exploit if you wait long enough. "I'm here to listen, that's all," I replied. "You're being dramatic," Emily said, forcing a small laugh. "This is already uncomfortable. Just say whatever you're going to say." "I don't need to." That's when I felt it, the shift. Tiny but real. My father's fingers stopped tapping. Emily's knee bounced once under the table before she pressed it still. My mother's eyes narrowed just a fraction, like she was trying to see around a corner she didn't know was there. Silence, my old, uncomfortable friend, had finally become their problem instead of mine. Michael cleared his throat again, but this time he didn't reopen the big file. Instead, he reached down and unzipped his briefcase. That sound, just metal teeth on fabric, suddenly felt loud. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, not from the estate file, but from a separate leather folder. It had a red wax seal and my grandfather's handwriting on the front. I recognized it immediately. He'd written my name on birthday cards in that same careful, slightly shaky script. "To my granddaughter, Hannah Miller," he read. "I leave full controlling interest in Northshore Capital Group, including all subsidiaries, accounts, and assets held solely in my name." Emily's chair creaked. "What is that?" she blurted, too quickly. Michael looked up. "A private investment firm your grandfather built over the last decade." My father finally spoke, voice rough. "That's impossible. Dad didn't have time for something like that. He made time, and he made sure it was kept separate from family accounts." He glanced down again. "The firm currently oversees logistics software holdings, regional distribution contracts, and real estate assets. Its valuation exceeds the amount distributed today." The amount distributed today being her $30 million. The silence that followed was different from the one before. This one had weight. 30 million suddenly sounded quite small. My mother let out a brittle laugh. "You expect us to believe Hannah owns more than all of us?" "Ownership isn't a belief, it's a fact," she replied. She stepped back, as if she needed more space to rearrange the world in her head. She was manipulated, she insisted, voice cracking. She turned him against us. I sat very still. My heart was pounding, but my voice, when I finally used it, was steady. "No," I said quietly. "You did that long before today." Michael cleared his throat. "Your father anticipated this objection," he said, "which is why he left further explanation in his own words." He pulled a small black USB drive from his briefcase and set it on the table. My mother went dead quiet. Panic, I've learned, has a sound. Hers was silence. Nobody tried to stop Michael when he plugged the drive into a laptop. A minute earlier, my mother had been barking orders like she ran the building. Now she was staring at that tiny object like it was a grenade. "You're not playing that," she hissed. "You can't just ambush us with some recording." "Your father requested this be shown if his decisions were questioned," Michael said. My father tried a different angle. "He had good days and bad days," he muttered. "Everyone knows that. He must have been upset." Michael didn't argue. He just hit play. The screen flickered. Then my grandfather's face filled it. He looked smaller than I remembered, but more present. Eyes sharp, back straight. He was wearing a pressed shirt and his old watch, like he'd dressed up for this conversation too. "I am here to explain why I changed my will," my grandfather began. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "I am not confused. I am not being pressured. I know exactly what I am doing." I felt my throat tighten. It's one thing to see a legal document. It's another to hear the voice you've missed speaking directly to a future you're standing inside of. "I have watched money leave my accounts without my approval," he said. "When I asked about it, I was told I had already agreed. I had not." Emily swallowed hard. The color had drained from her face. "I have also watched my relationship with Hannah be managed," he said, the word careful and bitter all at once. "Calls redirected, messages unanswered, visits canceled under the excuse of protecting my health. Every 'we don't want to tire him out,' every 'he's sleeping,' every 'it's not a good time' I'd heard over the last few years crowded my head at once." My mother slapped her palm on the table. "Turn this off," she demanded. He was upset. He didn't understand what he was saying. No one moved. Grandpa's voice kept going. "I understand more than they think," he said, eyes narrowing just slightly. "I understand who listens." He paused, then his expression softened. "Hannah listens. She asks questions. She builds instead of taking. She has never once treated me like an inconvenience." My eyes burned, but I refused to look away. That is why Northshore Capital Group belongs to her. Every share, every account. The recording ended with one last sentence that hung in the air like a verdict. "If you are watching this, it means you are trying to take what does not belong to you." The screen went black. No one rushed to fill the silence. It sat there, humming. "This doesn't prove anything," my father said eventually, but his voice didn't have teeth anymore. People say things when they're emotional. Michael closed the laptop with a quiet finality. The recording is dated and accompanied by a medical evaluation confirming full capacity, he said. But that isn't all. Of course it wasn't. He slid a thinner stack of papers to the center of the table. Bank statements, transfer logs, power of attorney documentation. His finger tapped the header. After your father raised concerns, I petitioned the court for a forensic review of the accounts. My mother scoffed, but it sounded more like a choke. These records show repeated transfers made under power of attorney for expenses unrelated to his care, luxury travel, vehicle leases, personal branding expenses. That money paid for family things, Emily snapped. Family things? I repeated, more to myself than to her. Influencer photo shoots and weekend spa trips? Interesting definition. We took care of him, my mother said, her voice climbing again. We sacrificed. You have no idea what that cost us. The court will consider that narrative, Michael said evenly. It will also consider timing, authorization, and consent. Then he turned to me. Hannah, your grandfather anticipated a challenge. He authorized me to file the sealed document immediately if his intent was questioned. My heart thudded so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. What happens now? I asked. The court will recognize your controlling interest in Northshore Capital Group. If the will is contested, all of this becomes part of the public record. Emily jerked her head up. Public? Yes, Michael said, including the transfers, the recording, and the evaluations. My mother's shoulders finally slumped. For the first time, she wasn't talking, arguing, or performing. She was just quiet, calculating. In that moment, I realized something simple and brutal. This wasn't about love or betrayal to them. It was about not being embarrassed. And the thing my grandfather left me wasn't a weapon. It was proof. You can fight feelings, you can twist memories, but numbers and signatures, those don't care who raised you. They didn't contest the will, not publicly, not in court. For people who were so sure about their control over the narrative, they backed down quickly once that narrative threatened to go on record. After that day, everything that mattered moved out of that conference room and into systems they couldn't smooth talk. Court filings, audit requests, email chains with case numbers in the subject line. The forensic accountant went through the joint accounts line by line, year by year. Every family expense, every emergency transfer, every temporary loan they thought they'd buried under vague labels. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a slow, methodical unspooling of a story they'd been spinning for a decade. On my side, the process was strangely quiet. I signed documents alone in offices that smelled of toner and stale coffee. No audience, no theatrics. Just a pen, a witness, and the steady scrape of my signature becoming something that had legal weight. One afternoon, after I signed the last set of papers, Michael slid them into a folder and looked up at me. They have no legal claim to your assets. Not now, not ever. I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding my breath for months. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like someone finally put a lock on a door that had been swinging open and shut my whole life. Meanwhile, their world shrank. My mother stopped appearing in society pages. The casual photos from intimate dinner parties and charity luncheons vanished. A couple of people I grew up with sent me texts with phrases like, "Heard they sold the house," and "moved out of state, I think." The house with the picture-perfect holiday photos on the steps, the manicured lawn, the front door wreath that changed with each season went on the market quietly and disappeared from our town's drive-by inventory. Emily's Instagram, which had once been a never-ending highlight reel of trips and outfits and brand deals, went quiet. First, the big trips stopped. Then the collabs and partnerships faded away. At some point, she switched her account to private, like closing the curtains would make the empty room feel less empty. They didn't call me, not to apologize, not to scream, not to negotiate. The silence that used to feel like punishment now just felt accurate. They had chosen each other, their narrative, their control, over any honest relationship with me or my grandfather. I finally believed them. 2 months later, I moved west. Not to run away, and not because I wanted to vanish into some new life where nobody knew my name. I moved because my grandfather built Northshore Capital Group for a reason, and part of that reason was a small office in Seattle with a handful of people who'd been quietly doing real work while my family played at being wealthy. I walked into that office on a gray Monday morning expecting stares and whispers. Instead, I got a nod from the receptionist, a meeting agenda, and a stack of reports. No one cared about my last name. They cared whether I understood the logistics software we were invested in, whether I could follow the conversation about distribution bottlenecks, whether I could make a decision that wouldn't sink a regional client. And I loved that. I stayed late, asked stupid questions, wrote things down, called Michael more times than I want to admit just to double-check I wasn't about to blow up something important. There were days I felt in over my head. There were nights I lay awake wondering if maybe my mother was right and I was the wrong daughter to trust with anything bigger than my own rent. Then I remembered how my grandfather looked in that video. Clear, certain, almost stubborn in the way he'd said, "I know exactly what I am doing." He could be wrong about lots of things. He wasn't wrong about who listened. I started a small scholarship fund under his name, tucked quietly into North Shore's community programs. No press releases, just a line item in the budget and a stack of applications from students who felt weirdly familiar. First-gen, working students, kids from small towns who learned the hard way how it felt to be overlooked. Emily emailed me once that first year. It wasn't one of her glossy public posts. It was a plain text, late-night kind of message. She wrote about how strange it was to wake up and realize the thing you thought made you special, money, access, attention, could disappear faster than a limited-time collaboration. She wrote that she didn't know who she was without any of that. I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, the way my messages to Grandpa used to vanish into the ether. Another part of me remembered sitting across from her at that table, watching her watch me lose everything on paper and not saying a word. When I finally replied, I kept it simple. I told her I hoped she found who she was without any of that. I said that if one day she wanted to have an honest conversation, not about money, just about us, I'd be open to it. No promises, no grand reconciliations, just a door that wasn't locked if she ever chose to knock. We're not close, not yet, maybe never. That's okay. Not every wound has to heal into what it used to be. Sometimes it just heals into something that doesn't hurt when you touch it anymore. Sometimes I catch myself thinking back to that conference room and how sure everyone was, how rehearsed the silence felt when my mother said, "This is final," how easy it was for them to hand my sister $30 million like it was a party favor and pretend I wasn't sitting in the same room breathing the same air. For a long time, I thought being ignored was the worst thing that could happen to you. Now I understand there's something worse, shaping your entire life around being seen by people who refuse to see you. My grandfather didn't fix my childhood. He didn't magically turn my parents into kind, self-aware people. What he did was something quieter and, in its own way, more radical. He paid attention when I thought no one was. He noticed who showed up and who made excuses. And then he used the only power he had left, his money and his paper trail, to make sure the person who listened got a chance to step out of the background. He also left me with a few truths I wish I'd learned earlier. Silence is not the same thing as weakness. Sometimes staying quiet isn't about having nothing to say. It's about waiting until what you say will actually matter. Patience is not passivity if you're watching, learning, documenting. Family is not defined by who gets to sit at the head of the table. It's defined by who protects you when you're not in the room, who tells the truth about you even when it's inconvenient. And you are absolutely allowed to leave spaces where your worth is a debate topic instead of a given. You are allowed to build a life that does not require the approval of people who only clap for you when it benefits them. These days, my life is less cinematic and more steady. I wake up to rain against my Seattle apartment windows, make coffee, check on a handful of companies my grandfather trusted, sit in meetings where my input is requested and sometimes challenged, but never erased. I visit the small plaque we mounted in Northshore's lobby, founded in quiet, built on integrity. His name is under it. So is mine. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that younger version of me who sat at countless family dinners, fading into the wallpaper while everyone praised Emily or strategized around my mother's next event. I wish I could sit across from that girl and tell her, "You are not invisible. You're just in the wrong room." So let me ask you this. If you were in my place, sitting at that table, watching your family hand your sibling a fortune and declare you worth nothing, then finding out your grandfather had secretly trusted you with something even bigger, what would you have done? Would you have walked away quietly and refused to rock the boat? Or would you have let the evidence speak and risk blowing up the image your family worked so hard to protect? Have you ever been the one written out of the story, only to find out later that someone believed in you more than they ever said out loud? Would you stay in that old story or start writing your own? Tell me what you would have done. And if you've lived through your own zero on paper moment, share it. Your letter to karma might be the next one we read here on Karma's Letterbox.